All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the special meeting that has been called for Wednesday, July 29th. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. I would ask everybody to please stand, if you will, for the flag salute. Dan, do you have your trusty flag with you today? There it is. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And also thank you to Mr. Boyce for having a flag too. All right, we got two. With that, I'll ask Mr. Boyce to do the roll call, please.
Sure. Miss Matthews.
She's here.
Okay, I can see her. Mrs. Olson. I don't think Linda is with us. Okay. Mr. Puntillo.
Here.
Dr. Sadin.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmick.
Here.
Mrs. Van Horn.
Here.
Mr. Sergio.
He's having technical difficulties.
Okay. Mr. Jess.
Here.
Mrs. Fabrizi.
Here.
Thank you. Please note that adequate notice of this meeting in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, has been provided by action of the President of the Board of Education on July 21st, 2020. Notices to the Courier News and Star Ledger circulated in the school district, and a posted notice to this effect on the Board of Education website and Building Bulletin Board, Administrative Headquarters, 51 West Cliff Street, Somerville, New Jersey. At this time, we're open for public comment on agenda items. Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to close the public comment, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kimmick. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Everybody's on mute. Everybody's giving me the thumbs up.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. All right, moving on to the superintendent report. Dr. Tian.
Okay, I'm going to present my screen, and tonight we're going to be doing the school reopening plan. So hold on one second. Okay, can everyone see that COVID-19 school reentry plan?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a simplified version of what we were doing with the stakeholder group. We put in some more details, took away some other things, but it basically captures everything that is within the plan. Just to give you an idea, when we were creating this plan, these were the things that we were focusing on, what we consider our 4 grounding principles. And so as we went through the development of this plan, we always went back to these 4 and said, how is it meeting these needs? So creating a school environment focused on a safe and healthy learning space for all students and staff. Students learn best when they are in school on a regular basis with their teachers and peers. Whole child development, which includes opportunities to be socially engaged with peers and teachers. And community has diverse needs, and school acts as basically a force within the community. So our reopening plan and scheduling plan, there's actually 2 different things. And so I just want to kind of define what the difference between these 2 are. For the reopening plan, I was in a superintendent meeting today, and the executive county superintendent shared that there's 2 things to look at. And the one is the reopening plan, which currently does not need board approval, but I think it's best practice to always get these things approved. Plus, they have done that before, the state, where they've told us we don't need board approval, and then they've turned around later and said, you know what, you do need board approval. So that would be the one part. The other one is scheduling plan. And all along, they've been saying how we need to get our reopening plan to the public within basically 30 days before school opens. really what it is you only need to get your scheduling plan, the plan that the students would be following as far as a schedule. You need to get that the 30 days before. But one thing I think everyone needs to keep in mind is that this reopening plan is definitely a working document. We are constantly making tweaks here and there based upon the latest feedback when we look at things, and as we're walking through the schedule with like mock-up students, we're noticing little things that need to be changed as a result of it. We also know that historically we've been getting a lot of different directions at different times from the state, so everyone just needs to realize that as new guidance comes from the state, that will cause us to make changes within the plan. So if you look at our plan in its entirety, which all the board members, it's been shared with you through the email, the areas that we focused on and that are identified in that plan are called critical areas of operation. So the road back, which was the document that the state provided everyone, all the school districts to follow and to address, we went through all those, and when we developed our plan, we made sure we hit on all those critical areas. So some of the highlights from that is that high-risk staff was one area we were supposed to be focusing on. And you have two different sub areas within that you can, I would say leverage to address the needs of the high-risk staff members. And that's FFCRA and 504. And the key with the 504 is that you just have to make sure that whatever possible 504 you come up with for a staff member, it cannot create an undue hardship on the district. For students, for high-risk students, everyone probably heard just recently where the governor came out and said that as a school district, you can offer 100% virtual for students. So that's how you address it for the high-risk students. Within our plan, we have face coverings have to be worn by staff and students in both the buildings and the buses. So it's covered in both places. Seating, whether it's on a bus or whether it's in a classroom, wherever it may be, seating will always have additional spacing between them. The custodial crew and our director of building grounds have been working hard and installing hand sanitizing stations in every classroom and in certain areas throughout the building, outside of bathrooms, in larger meeting areas, entrances and exits, things like that. The buses, doesn't matter whether it's a Branchburg bus or a Somerville bus, we have in every single building, which are going to be very specific to those buildings, different entrance and exits. So, for example, you might say sixth graders will go through this entrance and exit, seventh graders will go through this one. Same thing will happen in the high school, and the same thing will happen in elementary school. So each of the principals are working on those plans, and that will be part of a packet that they'll send out to their families. In the buildings where it's possible, we've created one-way hallways and stairways. And the reason why I say where it's possible, if you look at our buildings, the high school, it's possible, and the middle school, it's possible to do one-way hallways. Unfortunately, in the elementary school, that's a little harder because the way that the building is constructed. So they're coming up with alternate plans as far as spacing within the hallways. Each building has created an isolation area for any ill staff or students that would present with potential COVID symptoms. We have 10% random temperature screening for students and staff. And I know that's been one of the items that has been raised many times by parents and staff members. Everyone wants to know why we're not doing 100% of our students and staff. The CDC came out and actually recommended that it is parents who do the screening, which is what they should be doing anyway on a normal, pre-COVID situation. So they feel that that is in the best interest of everyone for them to do it. And our staff members are professionals, and as an adult, you can take your own temperature and check yourself for the symptoms. We have been doing it during the summer ESY program. The reason why it's there is because for the summer ESY program, they have to work under the summer camp guidelines. And with the summer camp guidelines, it's a requirement of the guidelines that says that we have to temperature check every individual. The reason why they came out with that was because it's a very small population. But just to give you an idea, we have approximately, I want to say 30 students, 30 to 60 students, it takes about, with 4 people doing it, it takes about 30 minutes to get through all those students. So if you take a school like Vanderveer, which has the mid 8s, 800, 850, you can imagine how long it would take for there. So 10% is what we went with. That's above and beyond what, even the CDC recommends. Social distance signage and markers will be in all the different buildings. Visitors will only be able to come to the building by appointment. And when they do come in, because we do not know them, they would be screened, and they would also have to have a face covering. If for some reasons a visitor was someone who could not tolerate a face covering, they have medical reasons why they couldn't, then we would set up an alternate location so that they could still visit and do whatever meeting they had to do, but it would be in a different location. In each building, we're going to be having cubbies that are set up outside the doors, and that will be for parents to drop off something that they want to leave for their child at school, whether it be a book or whatever it might be that the child may have forgotten. So that'll be outside, so the parents do not need to come in the building. The Department of Health will be contacted for any suspected COVID cases, and our job in the district is to assist them with contact tracing information. And what that means, for those that don't know what contact tracing is, it's basically if there's a suspected case, the health department would be asking us the schedules of students, where were they throughout the day during these days, who were they next to. So we would be providing them all of that information. Sanitization of high contact surfaces. And what that means is, if you think about what do people touch all the time, that's like doorknobs and railings and bathrooms. So we'll be doing extra sanitation throughout the days on those high contact surfaces. There's been concerns, questions raised about the disinfection of classrooms between AM and PM. We've actually did test runs of can we do it, and how long would it take, how many people will we need in order to get it within that time frame. We've worked that out for the buildings. So for the middle school and high school, which are operating on an AM PM schedule, there will be disinfection in between those 2 sessions. Each night they will be doing the entire building, so that would be a normal thorough cleaning every night. For buildings where they are changing classes, for example the high school, the students they would have sanitizing wipes available to them in the classrooms, and they would be wiping down their desks. Meals is another part of the plan that you always have to have. That question came up: why do we have to provide meals if we are not having lunch in school? But as a school district, you're required to provide that. So we will be having meals for grab and go for anyone that is interested in them. Currently, locker rooms are closed, and unless we get further guidance, we're not supposed to be using them. Field trips are currently suspended, and if things change where we can open them up, we will, but for right now, they're closed. We're not going on them, sorry. Right at School and YMCA, we've been working with both organizations to provide childcare, and each of those have been very receptive in working with us to create basically support systems for our families and our staff members. The district will implement a full, from P to 12, every grade level, a one-to-one device, which we've been for the most part, but students will have their own device. And with that, you would also have Wi-Fi for every student, so they would be able to access it at home. So I'm just going to take a minute to just, kind of go over the schedules for each building. I'm going to start with the high school. So high school will be operating on an A-B schedule. And what that means is that if a student is an A student, they may be on A days, they will be in person. On B days, they would be virtual. We'll also have B students, which will be on A days, they'll be virtual, and B days, they'll be in person. So they operate opposite. However, those kids might be in the exact same class, and they'll be getting the same information every day. So the teaching that will be going on every day will be the next step in the teaching process. So the only difference will be the kids will be connecting to that, whether differently, either in person on one day or virtually the next. We've created a 6-period day, and how we did that was we basically eliminated lunch and study hall. And we do have available period 8 and 9. And during those, there will be classes that will be available to high school students. For example, if a student has 6 periods plus normally like a phys ed health, so it's like 7 classes that they take. If they're taking that 7th or 8th class, they would then have one of those classes out of their group virtually. But all health will be virtual. And within health, students either going to have health, driver's ed, CPR, first aid, depending on their grade level. So those will be all offered there. Also, there'll be some extra help and study, a structured study hall, and those are for our special ed students. So they'll all be contained within that period 8 and 9. One of the things we have in this plan is that if sports happens this year, then for students that elect, so they don't have to go, especially this is consideration for Branchburg because you'd have to travel back and forth from Somerville to Branchburg, we would have a open lunch where the kids could go to whatever restaurant they choose or outside or whatever, and then they would be due back at a certain time, and they would be in a study hall unless they had they'd be in a study hall, or they could take one of their virtual classes at that time in the study hall. So they would have those options. If the state says to the school district, you need to go to a 100% virtual model for all students every day. We did change the schedule slightly for the high school. And the reason why we did that is because for both staff and students, being on the computer for that long can be time consuming and draining on them. So we actually built in some breaks in between each one of the periods. But the structure doesn't change. We're still having a 6-period day, and we're still having the extra periods at the end where they can get extra help, study hall, or that extra class. For middle school, they're operating on an AM and PM schedule, but you can kind of change it up a little bit where it's also an AB schedule. And what that means is the kids that are an AM student on A day, they'll take 2 of their courses, their core 4 out of their 4 core. So they might take ELA and science. And then on B day, when they come in, they'll take social studies and math. So they'll be alternating each day in that pattern. If they're an AM, they would take those 4 core in the morning, and they would take their electives, health, and elective, health, and Spanish in the afternoon virtually. If they're a PM student, they would take those elective, health, and Spanish in the morning virtually, and then in the afternoon, they would take their core. So these were just sample schedules for what it would look like for a teacher. And this would be a sample schedule for our elective teachers. If they had to go 100% virtual, just like we did with the high school, if it was the state said, okay, you need to go 100% virtual, once again, we would keep the same structure, and it would basically stay the same, except for all the classes would be virtual, whether it's core or electives. For Vanderveer, they are similar in the sense they are a day 1, day 2. The kids are in 5 days a week. And when they're in on day 1, they will be focusing on basically language arts, both reading and writing. And on day 2, they'll do a little bit of language arts, but they'll do math, science, and social studies. And they'll always have their electives as well. So if they're an AM student, they will be go up to here. An AM student would have their core classes in the morning, and then their specials in the afternoon. We've had some questions about extension activities. What is that? And an extension activity is an ideal lesson. The way it works is that a teacher does a mini lesson, which is teaching the main concept of what they want the kids to learn. And then they break into support. So they'll have kids work on whatever it is that they're trying to have them learn, but supporting them through the process. Once the kids feel and the teacher feels like they have it, then they normally would go into independent. So the extension activities are that independent part. So the idea behind that is that parents are not having to teach the students when it's that extension activities time. The kids may do those extension activities on their own, or they may do it in small groups, depending on the activity and what the teacher has set up. And that would be a special, this is for the Plan C. So if you were having to go 100% virtual, once again, we would keep the same schedule. So the structure doesn't change. And we would just simply do it in the all virtual, everything. Academics. So we're doing synchronous learning as much as possible. This is a departure from the spring 2020 when most of it was asynchronous. And we have heard everyone loud and clear, and we agree with you that having a live teacher teach our children is the best thing for them. So all of the instruction for virtual students will be synchronous, and it will be live. And so they will log in at that given time, and they will take that course. Students will still get 180 days of instruction in the core area. It doesn't matter whether it's an A-B schedule. Because of the extension activities, they will still be moving along through the scope and sequence of the curriculum as it was, whether it was pre-COVID or post-COVID, it's still the same pace. So they'll cover all the same standards. Our district uses Google Classroom, and so that will be the tool that we're using across the district. And all of the instructional materials will be uploaded a week prior. And Seesaw, for the very early elementary grades, they will be using that as well. For IDEA, due to the significant needs of students enrolled in self-contained programs, the schedule of these students will not mirror those of the general education students. So, for example, if a child is in a life skills class, they're going to have a slightly different schedule because they're also receiving related services. So the child study team will be reaching out to all of those parents individually and providing them specific schedules for their children. And so once again, we'll have all the needed devices and the Wi-Fi access for those students for anything they need to do outside of that class time. And we've been doing the ESY program, which has been in person, working very well. Professional development, we've spent from March of last year to June, we offered a lot of professional development for our staff on how to effectively provide hybrid education using, virtual formats for virtual students, So that has been part of our process, and we will be continuing to offer it through this summer, and the county is doing it as well, and we'll continue that into next year. And that basically ends that. It's not presenting. I also had sent out questions and answers. These were compiled from our the feedback form that after we had released our tentative plans, all the families and staff members that had provided us feedback, we went and read through every one of them. Some of the themes were the same, the questions were the same, so we kind of grouped those together. But I don't remember the exact number. I think it was 120 something. I'm not sure. I kind of lost track after a while. But we answered every single question. We provided that to everyone. So if you haven't read through them, we encourage you to, because some of the questions that you may have should be captured in that. Any questions? Okay.
Great.
Yes, that's my presentation, Mr. Derek. Jess.
Thank you, Dr. Tian. Very good. Great job putting everything together. Please thank your staff and everybody else that worked on it. I know, this is hitting a moving target, especially today with the assembly having a bill brought forth in the assembly saying that it should be virtual learning for the whole first part of the school year. So I know that it's probably going to change a couple more times between now and probably within the next 2 weeks even. But thanks very much, because it's a very, very good comprehensive plan, and I think everybody should be very happy about that. So thank you very much for that. All right. Moving on to new business. The first item of new business is a school reopening plan. Be it resolved that the Board of Education approve the attached school reopening plan.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Puntillo. May I have a second on that?
Second. Second.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Also, Mr. Boyce, just note that Mr. Sergio and Ms. Olson have joined us, please. All right, is there any
Okay.
discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll ask Mr. Boyce if he would do a roll call, please.
Yes. Ms. Matthews,
Yes.
Mr. Carlson.
He's not
Oh,
here.
Mr. Carlson is absent, I'm sorry. Mrs. Olson. Linda, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Puntillo,
Yes.
Dr. Sadin,
Yes.
Mr. Kimmick,
Yes.
Mrs. Van Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Sergio,
Yes.
Mr. Jess,
Yes.
Mrs. Fabrizi.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Item number 2, which is the 2020-2021 budget adjustment plan approval. We're going to hold that until after our executive session, as I know we're going to have some items to discuss on that in executive session. Item number 3, policies for first reading. Be it resolved that the Board of Education approve the following policies, regulations for a first reading. P1250 visitors, P3510 operation and maintenance of plant, P3541.33 transportation safety, P4111.1 and 4211.1 non-discrimination affirmative action breastfeeding, P4111-0.2 and 4211.2 domestic violence, P5113 attendance, absences, and excuses, P5134 married, pregnant, lactating pupils, R5134 married, pregnant, lactating pupils, P5141 health, P5142.2 illness, P5141.3 health examinations and immunizations, P6140 curriculum adoption, and P6161.1 evaluation and selection of instructional materials. May I have a motion on that item, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Sadin. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sergio. Any discussion?
This is Linda. I'm the chair of this committee. I went through all of these. Most of them have to do with adding some COVID-19 information to them. But there are 2 that really don't have to do with that, and that's 6140 curriculum adoption. And basically that adds instructions on political, economic, and social contributions of persons with disabilities who are LGBT in the middle school and the high school. Those connections have to be made to mention or talk about people who represent those groups. And 6161.1 are guidelines for evaluation and selection of instructional materials, because they should also reflect those groups. Other than that, it's mostly COVID related.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Olson, for letting everybody know. So especially for the members of the public, that's the reason why we're updating these policies. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Boyce, can we do a roll call, please?
Yes, Ms. Matthews,
Yes.
Mrs. Olson, Mrs. Olson,
Yes.
Mr. Puntillo,
Yes.
Dr. Sadin,
Yes.
Mr. Kimmick,
Yes.
Mrs. Van Horn.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Sergio,
Yes.
Mr. Jess,
Yes.
Mrs. Fabrizi.
Yes.
All right, moving on to item number 4, revised 2020-2021 school calendar. Be it resolved that the Board of Education approve the attached revised 2020-2021 school calendar. We have a motion on that item, please.
So moved.
Move, sir.
Thank you, Mrs. Olson. May I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kimmick.
Second.
Any discussion? Can we have a roll call, Mr. Boyce, please?
Yes, Ms. Matthews,
Yes.
Mrs. Olson,
Yes.
Mr. Puntillo,
Yes.
Dr. Sadin,
Yes.
Mr. Kimmick,
Yes.
Mrs. Van Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Sergio,
Yes.
Mr. Jess,
Yes.
Mrs. Fabrizi.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, public comment on any such item that the public might like to comment on. We are now open to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Jess. We currently have one comment that came in from Rebecca Bell, 79 Franklin Place. She said, I would like to formally thank Chris Mulligan for all of the hard work he has put into making Somerville a testing facility for the CLEP test, CLEP. Thanks to Mr. Mulligan, there are about 14 students who are going to be able to take their sociology CLEP test in the next 2 weeks so that they can hopefully receive 3 free college credits. Some of these students have cited financial difficulty for paying for college, and that these free credits will help them tremendously. Thank you again to Mr. Mulligan and the administration at Somerville for making this happen for them.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bell, for the comments. I know it is a good thing for our kids, so hopefully they will all be successful in getting those 3 credits for school. Seeing no other public comment, can I have a motion to close the public session, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. May I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Puntillo. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. Now, be it resolved that the Board of Education move to recess to executive session to discuss the superintendent of schools evaluation and personnel matters as they relate to staff reductions in force and matters of attorney-client privilege. The minutes of the executive session, to the extent permitted by law, will be made available to the public once the issues are resolved, subject to confidentiality requirements. Action may be taken. May we have a motion, please?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. May I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kimmick. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? So moved. It is 6:35 p.m. come back into public session, please?
So moved. So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Candace. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Olson. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we're back at
Aye.
6:58 p.m. So we have 4 items that we're going to take action on now. The first item is going to be approval of the superintendent's evaluation for the period of July 1, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. May I have a motion on that item, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Trujillo. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank
Second.
you, Dr. Sadin. Any discussion? Mr. Boyce, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Miss Matthews,
Yes.
Mrs. Olson,
Abstain.
Mr. Puntillo,
Yes.
Dr. Sadin,
Yes.
Mr. Kimmick,
Yes.
Mrs. Van Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Sergio,
Yes.
Mr. Jess,
Yes.
Mrs. Fabrizi.
Yes.
Thank you. The second item of action will be item number 2 under new business, which is the 2020-2021 budget adjustment plan approval. Resolved that the Board of Education adopt the attached 2020-2021 budget adjustment plan reflecting a list of reductions to appropriation line items necessary to address the 2020-2021 state aid reduction issued on July 10th, 2020 by the New Jersey Department of Education. May I have a motion on that item, please?
So moved, sir.
Thank you,
So
Dr.
moved.
Sadin. May I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sergio. Any discussion? Mr. Boyce, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Miss Matthews,
Yes.
Mrs. Olson,
Yes.
Mr. Puntillo,
Yes.
Dr. Sadin,
Yes.
Mr. Kimmick,
Yes.
Mrs. Van Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Sergio,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jess,
Yes.
Mrs. Fabrizi.
Yes.
All right. Item number 3. Mr. Boyce, would you like me to read that resolution or do you want to read it?
It's up to you.
All right. How about if I'll stay on a roll? How about if I do it?
Okay.
All right. The third item of action is the elimination of positions. Whereas due to a significant and material reduction in the district's 2020-2021 state aid, the board must effectuate a reduction in force. Now, therefore, be it resolved, based upon the recommendation of the superintendent, that the following positions are hereby eliminated effective immediately. 1, full-time academic achievement officer position. 3, physical education teaching positions. Be it further resolved that the superintendent or his designee shall provide the affected employees whose names are on file with the board secretary with notifications of this action. And be it finally resolved that any tenured employees identified above shall remain on the district's preferred eligible list in accordance with the provisions of NJSA 18A:28-12. May I have a motion on those items, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Sadin.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Boyce, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Miss Matthews,
Yes.
Mrs. Olson,
Yes.
Mr. Puntillo,
Yes.
Dr. Sadin,
Yes.
Mr. Kimmick,
Yes.
Mrs. Van Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Sergio,
Yes.
Mr. Jess,
Yes.
Mrs. Fabrizi.
Yes.
All right. And the last item of business this evening is whereas due to a significant and material reduction in the district's 2020-21 state aid, the board must effectuate a reduction in force. Now, therefore, be it resolved based upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the following positions are hereby eliminated effective immediately. 2 half-time special education instructional aid positions, 1 half-time kindergarten aid position. Be it further resolved that the superintendent or his designee shall provide the affected employees whose names are on file with the board secretary with notification of this action. May I have a motion on that item, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Olson. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Any discussion? Mr. Boyce, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Ms. Matthews,
Yes.
Mrs. Olson,
Yes.
Mr. Puntillo,
Yes.
Dr. Sadin,
Yes.
Mr. Kimmick,
Yes.
Mrs. Van Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Sturgill. Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Jess.
Yes. All right, thank you. That's one of the hardest things that any Board of Education has to do for anybody out there that's listening, and it's not something that the board takes lightly. It's because we were forced to do this because of our reduction of over $500,000 in state aid. So, Mr. Boyce and Dr. Teen have done a very good job of trying to maintain the integrity of the budget and not affect the education of our students, and we commend them for that. We wish everybody well that has been affected by not only these reductions, but by the current pandemic that's ongoing. There being no other business, may I ask for a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Oh, everybody jumping on that one. Thank you, Ms. Matthews. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Kimmick. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? And we are adjourned at 7:05. Thanks, everybody.